I could see a future, I don't know how far out in the future, where AI is actually producing products and automating product, making products so much less expensive while also keeping the world much greener and making it possible for us to not even have to, where we can focus on higher level things. One of my philosophies is when you made a mistake hiring somebody, like, I want them to be really smart and really capable. That doesn't mean they have to be the most skilled yet, because if they're really smart, their skill builds really fast, right? Whereas somebody really skilled that isn't as smart, is going to plateau very quickly.
So, David Hirschfield, you are a powerhouse founder and CEO of Tekyz Corp and host of the Scaling Smarter podcast. With over 35 years in tech, including pioneering work in AI and software startup acceleration, you're here to share your launch first methodology for fast tracking founders from concept to cash flow, plus a whole lot of wisdom on how to thrive in the ever-changing tech landscape. You've built a reputation for turning even the toughest recovery projects into success stories. Which one stands out to you and why?
That's a good question. And actually, I wasn't expecting that question, but a recent customer that I had in healthcare who was struggling with their existing development firm for about a year and a half. And they were the firm they were struggling with, I won't name, but they were a large development firm that was US based, and they focused on healthcare, but they were really struggling with them. And so after a year and a half, they were referred to me by a mutual connection that we have. And I went ahead and took it over. My team did. And they loved us. And I love what I call those recovery projects, because people that are struggling with a dev team then come to us. They recognize how different we are. And they're my favorite projects, even more than brand new founders, because usually brand new founders don't really understand what we do and what to compare it with versus somebody who's worked with another tech team. And so I love those. Anyway, that one turned around. We launched their product, and they recently raised $5 million and did a big deal with Google. So that was a great success story and great people at that company. I'm not taking a lot of responsibility for the fact that they raised all that money, just that we were there to be able to support them and help them get to that point.
Your launch first method promises to take startups from idea to profit fast. What's the main thing that turns new companies into cash cows?
So I don't want to say that it takes you to profit fast, but it potentially can, but it takes you to cash flow fast. So the problem with most startups when they're at the concept stage is that you have a founder who has solved a problem that they believe everybody needs solved, right? And they have a vision for what their company would look like and how it's going to grow big, right? And they very often think this is going to be the next unicorn, and they believe in themselves, they believe in their vision, and these are code words for I'm going to fail. If they can't step back and change that perspective. So the reason is because founders get in their own way. Their belief systems about their success and their product and their market get in the way of them being successful. So I often say that that's a founder wearing the black robe, right? Preaching about their the future of their company and how great it's going to be and how great the product is, and they're in love with their product. So I try to peel that black robe off when I'm working with founders like this and wrap them in a white coat and turn them into clinicians, because they have to recognize most everything they believe are assumptions. They don't have proof yet. So what they need is proof, and they need it as quickly as possible. And proof doesn't mean that people say, I love your idea. Proof means that you put the product out there and people start buying it. That's the only proof that you can confirm you have product market fit. And I define product market fit as you're selling enough product at a high enough closing ratio where your cost to acquire each customer is about 1/3 of what that lifetime value of each customer is. And to get the only way you know you've hit product market fit is you're selling a product and people are buying it in those numbers. So what I try to do is I take founders from concept and get them into cash flow quickly within a few months. if possible, within 2 or 3 months, with the idea that we're going to create a design prototype, which is not software, but it looks like you've built your product and it behaves like your product. We take that and then we create basically a high value pre-launch opportunity for people to buy in. And we go through a really detailed niche analysis to really nail down who's that early adopter and what's the value proposition. And once we have figured that out, we test it by getting them to buy in early, by offering them a high enough value opportunity that they're afraid to miss out. And they're solving a big enough problem that they know they're going to have to get the software once it comes out. And if they can't sell it then there's probably a problem with the business model, either the wrong niche or the wrong messaging, or you're focusing on the wrong problems, or it's the wrong market altogether. And we can pivot quickly and easily because we haven't built the software yet. And we don't want to build the software until we actually can start to generate revenue and prove we got product market fit, because now you know that investment, there's a market behind it. So that's the idea behind launch first.
You mentioned a couple of kind of pitfalls that founders should be wary of. One is perhaps having some blind spots as the founder. Maybe there's some biases there, some fallacies, and you needed another opinion to kind of come in and create some daylight between you and your assumptions as the founder. You also mentioned the business model. Maybe some of the tests exposed that the business model needs a revamp or completely redevelopment. What would you say is the secret to turning around a dying business?
So very often, there's a couple things. This is a great question because there's really a couple avenues to kind of go down when we're talking about it. Number one is founders who love their product and believe in their vision need to step back and figure out go back to the original problem. What problem are you solving? What problem do your customers want you to solve? And focus on the problem and the customer. So founders who are serial founders that are typically really successful love the problem, not the product. They spend all their time talking to customers, understanding their problem, understanding the history with their problem, how they've dealt with the problem in the past. Have they found a solution? Why didn't they stay with that solution? They never talk about their features or their product. They just talk about the problem. Those are founders they spend a lot of time talking to customers or potential customers. That's one thing about turning around. The other one is serial founders are risk mitigators. These are high anxiety people that find the path to success because they think of everything that could cause them to fail, and they come up with a mitigation strategy, whether it's well thought out or at least notional mitigation, but it's not like they haven't thought about it before because they're afraid something is going to come out of left field or right field or from underneath or above them, and it's going to flip their assumptions on their head and take the business in a different direction. So they want to be aware of those things, and they want to know that they can handle it if that happens. And if they can't, they want to figure out how to steer as far away from that even ever happening as possible. So good founders who are really successful are brilliant at risk mitigation and risk assessment. Where most founders who have that belief in their vision, they know they're going to be successful, don't do risk analysis and risk mitigation planning. And so when things start to go wrong, they're unwilling to recognize it because they haven't thought about it before. Whereas founders who have done this risk mitigation strategy analysis recognize when something is happening that might look like one of these risk scenarios, and they already have thought about how they should deal with it. And so their head's not in the sand. Their heads, think of them as like prairie dogs. They're up like this, constantly looking in every direction. Those are successful founders.
In your 35 years working at tech giants and launching your own companies, which epic fail turned into your greatest teacher? And how do you pass that wisdom on to new founders?
Okay. So my very first software startup was successful. I was working at Texas Instruments, and an engineer at Texas Instruments and myself, we became partners, and we started this thing. and we successfully launched it despite every effort on both our parts. We ended up growing it to 800 customers in 22 countries and sold it to a publicly traded firm. Several years later, I started by myself. I started another startup, but I didn't follow the same playbook. I didn't even realize there was a playbook that made me successful the first time, and not following it caused me to fail the second time. I went down a much more classic route where I built an MVP. I got a bunch of people using it in a free beta. I tried to raise money. I went through the classic route that I see so many other startups fail. Whereas the first time we created a product really quickly, a very simple MVP, took us 2 months. I mean, it was very simple, and we put it out on the market right away. And we started selling it fairly quickly. And we just followed that path and followed our customers. It didn't occur to me that the second time I went about it, that I was going to fail, because I was doing it differently, which I did fail. I actually got offered the money I was trying to raise, but they wanted way too much equity, I thought. And then I never got another offer. So if I had taken that, maybe it would have been a different story.
It sounded like one was by selling a product and the other was trying to sell an idea, where the product was not yet built. Do you think that there were other differences there in your approach?
No, they were both products that I built, because I didn't have this launch first concept, but I put people on free trials with the idea. It was a wholesale trading network for auto dealers and auto wholesalers, because people go into auto dealerships or they call a wholesaler and they're looking for a particular car, and if it's not at auction, they can't find it. So even though it might be sitting on another dealer's lot, or it might be a new trade-in that hasn't been right. So this was going to be a wholesale trading network for dealers to. So I got about several hundred people on the network, but it was all free trials, and they were using it. Had thousands and thousands of cars on there. And I was trying to basically create critical mass and then raise a bunch of money, and then grow this and accelerate it. And that was a mistake. I should have been charging everybody for the software the whole time. I was just afraid if I start charging them, then they'll start dropping off, and that'll send the wrong message to the market. And these were, I was driven out of fear, and as a result, I drove myself out of business the second time around. So if I had just started charging like I did the first time, and not worried about building the perfect product and building the perfect market and social network, I would have grown that business and been able to sell it and been successful a second time. I just didn't follow the same playbook. At the time, I didn't have this concept to launch first, and it would have been difficult back then to do what we did with launch first, but it was much simpler to build an MVP, mostly because we were building simpler software to solve problems back then. Software has become way more sophisticated since then.
That's an interesting pivot, going from Texas Instruments into launching this auto trading platform. How did you come up with that idea? What was like the spark for that?
Well, actually, I went from Texas Instruments to my first software product, which was more like an ERP product. That was logistics, inventory management, route distribution for snack food marketplace. And that was because I had a brother-in-law who had recently left the military, bought a whole bunch of vending machines, got them all placed, and wasn't sure how to manage the inventory. So I looked at that market. I looked at the snack food market in general. I thought, you know what, there's actually a business here, because all they have is these expensive Unix-based products, but you have all these small to medium-sized businesses that are basically doing snack food delivery or vending machine, own vending machines and route drivers. So we ended up starting that with the idea we were just supporting small vending operators. And it turned out that we ended up with these huge multi-warehouse snack food distributors by the end of it, that had hundreds of route drivers and thousands of machines, or they were delivering to convenience stores or office coffee or things like that. It just sort of grew naturally without us realizing what we were getting ourselves into.
Yeah, you're just adding to your capability and problems you can solve as you go through life, basically just being observant.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on turning that into a big business. We thought that we would just sort of create a little annuity. People would buy our software and pay a maintenance fee or pay for some upgrades, and then we would go on and build something else. And then, of course, it took a life of its own. The second one was because I decided to leave leave the software industry altogether after I left the company. I was VP of products for them, the company that acquired my first company, for several years. Then I left them and I got an auto dealer license, and I was just going to part-time buy really high-end cars and source those for people that I knew that wanted, Mercedes or BMWs, right? But didn't want to buy new ones. So I was going to source or Porsches. And then I found out it was really hard to source cars, except at the auction that you're competing against everybody. Instead of being able to get them right when there's a trade-in from a dealer where you might be able to get it for less money and not have to pay the commission to the auction. So that's what started the second business.
What is an underrated AI opportunity that you're most excited about?
Underrated AI opportunity?
Yeah, with the software and AI kind of entering the I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, saying that AI is going to eat software's lunch now. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts being in this space?
I think that's a while. As fast as AI is evolving, it's not going to just replace existing software systems anytime soon. That's the idea that you don't need any kind of organized software because AI just automatically organizes itself based on what you need right now. But that's hard to imagine when you start to think of logistics and route distribution and inventory management, or tracking and managing customer relationships and buyer history and all that. There's a lot that AI can do there, but it's hard to imagine that you're just going to eliminate the need for designing databases. And there's just a lot that it's not going to do that fast, but it's going to make it possible to do a lot of things that were really difficult before and make them pretty easy. But you'll still need some kind of scaffolding around that, some kind of control and maintenance and management around it. And what you'll do is that control, I see it as kind of an evolving bubble, this control systems that you need around it. They get thinner and bigger because you're controlling a lot more stuff at a higher level, and AI is doing more automatically at the guts of things, right? But it's not zero, but you're not giving up that control completely. Because AI can't possibly know how to plan. I'll give you an example, because we're trying to use AI right now to do everything. One of them is do our project estimates for us, because we do very detailed estimates that are costly to put together. And so we're building an AI model for that. Another one is we're trying to write code with AI, right? And we've been doing this for quite a while now. But I want to get to where we build an entire system all driven from AI. It may be different pieces and assembled differently, but where the developer doesn't have to get in there and write code. And we're not there yet. So what happens in a simple system, you can do that. If you don't care about the architecture and the quality of the code, you can do that today if the system is really simple. With products like Replit and Bolt and things like that. But if you need a sophisticated system and you need a sophisticated deployment and architecture for scalability and things like that, those tools are nowhere near what they need to be able to do this. And what happens is, as soon as you get past a certain level of sophistication, the coding tools lose context of the whole application. They can't think, I'm working in this area, and this I need to know every line of code pretty well. And then out here, I need to know how all these functions work pretty well. And out here, I need to know they exist because things are going to touch them indirectly from what I'm working on here. And a really good developer that's what they do. I always liken it to the jugglers who spin plates. Most people can spin 2 or 3 plates at a time. They've got enough focus, but a really good developer spins up 5, then 6, then 7, each one of these plates being a different part of the application that are all in their head all at once as they're making changes that may affect all these things, right? And so they're taking all this into context. And they may have 8 plates at a time. That's why if you're talking to somebody who's really deep in their code, and you walk in and say, "Excuse me," they like flip out because all the plates come falling down, and it's not easy to get those plates back up. So you got to spin them all back up again. I've had this experience. And it's the rare programmer that just has the plates running on autopilot all the time. So AI has a lot of trouble with this. It gets what it, and the thing that a developer can do that AI can't do right now is a developer realize when there's plates that they can't spin up and are outside their control, but are important in the context of what they're doing. They just know they're out there. And so they step back and they realize they need to do more analysis and digging and evaluation. AI doesn't. AI says, okay, this is my context now. This is my world, and I'm going to run with it, even though now I'm off track completely. And it just runs away and ruins the good work it's done up until then. If you're not careful and don't control it. Even with releases of tools in the last few weeks, it's still doing that. And it's very frustrating when that happens. So you got to control it. We are using we're using editors that have AI integrated into them. It's supposed to know your entire code base. And our applications that we're working with are not that sophisticated when it loses context and it starts to spin out. But in some areas, it's brilliant and it's amazing. So I can break it down to different aspects of development of a project. And certain areas, it's 80 to 90%. Other areas, it's 25 to 30%. And you just have to know what areas it's capable of really doing most of the work versus just some of the work. And to the degree you can do that, you can really get unbelievable productivity gains, but not across all aspects of it. And we want to be at 85 to 90% of it being built with AI, because that means our estimates are a fifth of what they were, a year before. And that's huge.
Yeah, especially as it compounds. You have built an exceptional culture at your company. Could you talk about how you build a culture, how founders can build a culture that consistently pushes boundaries without burning out the team?
So, it starts with hiring. I always have this philosophy. I had it for I don't remember where I learned this. I just figured out one day. I'm not sure if this is a learned thing, but I have heard other people talk about this since I came up with it, but I only hire somebody if they're smarter than me. And the people that I have in my team that are managing other people can only hire somebody if they're smarter than them. Because I want the ball to roll uphill, not downhill. I want people that have people working for them. Their job is to sweep away obstacles, because those people can add value faster and add value more broadly if the impediments are out of the way. And some of that sweeping obstacles has to do with identifying ways of automating the things that we do as a development team on a regular basis, building integrations, establishing protocols and procedures that help the developers be more accurate, more consistent, to share, to communicate more easily, things like that. Not to be managers and controllers of those people. And there's some of that. You never get out of all of that, because you want everybody inculcated in the way you work as a team. But people love working as a team in our organization, because we just work constantly at trying to improve. And that doesn't mean forcing everybody else to be better. That means giving everybody else the tools so that they can work better inside our structure and our protocols. And the protocols are really important because a lot of our clients are compliance related, like law enforcement, healthcare, things like that. And so protocols and procedures are like critically important that we stay in compliance, because there's third-party audits and things like that happen. So the goal is, the belief is we're never good enough, and we always have to strive to be better. And when you do that for enough years and you hire people that are really smart, you just keep getting better and better and better. The way I think of it also is when people say, well, what does that mean to be exceptional software development team? I say, well, you shouldn't believe somebody because they tell you that. They should have evidence, and the evidence should be easy to produce, and they should know what kind of evidence they have. I call it the artifacts of being an exceptional team, that an exceptional team produces naturally that a average team does not. For example, I talk about the estimates that we do. We're really accurate with our estimates, or we strive to be. We're still not accurate enough, but we want to be within 10% of any estimate, even if it's like a 6-month project, right? We want to be within 10% of what we estimated, unless scope shifts. And last year we were, with our largest customer, we were less than 6% variance from our estimates. And we measure all that. We know what the estimates are versus the actuals on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And we report that every week to our clients. So it's a transparent thing. The client can see, are we going over? Are we going under? Are we meeting the number of hours that we estimated? Are we meeting the deadlines that we said that we would meet in terms of delivery? If not, why? If we're more than 10%, we do a postmortem. What went wrong? Why are we off? We don't want to be over or under. We don't want to be sandbagging the estimates any more than we want to be falling behind on our estimates. Sometimes, and when that happens, usually there's an R&D component, or somebody got sick if it's just a delivery delay or something like that was unexpected. And we even project a certain amount of that, off days and sick days and things like that. So that goes into our estimates. So that's an example, right? If you're an exceptional team, you should be able to produce all this detail because it's always being tracked. And to the degree that we even put daily timesheets for all the people on a project, we attach them to all the invoices so that nobody ever has to ask us to produce those timesheets, or why did somebody spend so many hours on a particular task, because clients can audit us every single month.
Well, and you're being audited by nature constantly. Like, people are going to, like, competitors and stuff will either outperform or underperform you. And so over time, I think that's a great policy. What you said about hiring, trying to hire like people smarter than you, I think is a great idea. I'm curious, what do you think about what Elon Musk said maybe a year ago when he was interviewed about the kind of challenges of being a founder? He likened it to, or a CEO, he likened it to staring in the void and chewing glass, because you get all the hard problems. Do you think that's a function of the type of company that you create, or do you think that's a universal truth?
I find it, first of all, it doesn't matter whether you love him or hate him, and you can both love and hate the man, right? He's one of those rare people you can, see a lot of good that he's done and see a lot of bad that he's done or doing, or whatever your particular philosophy is about him. But he's a visionary. I don't think anybody can, a rare kind of mind in that respect, where he can make the future happen, almost like, there's only a handful of people like this, that you can point to. You've got, Gates and Jobs and Musk, and there's a few, and maybe Elon Musk is even more of a visionary than any of them when you consider what he was going for. But with so it's hard for me. I am not them, right? I am human, mere mortal. So, yes, that's true. What he said of founders, if you're a founder, there's certain things that you're going to be dealing with that nobody else in your company is going to be dealing with. But to the degree that you've got a healthy company and you're a really good founder in terms of being a mentor, to the degree that you need to be that, other people you're taking over those difficult things and you're delegating. So I don't know that I totally agree with him. I am sure that's true for him. But I don't really like to compare myself to people, I'm, like I said, I'm a mere mortal.
Well, when we talked about culture, and you've probably traveled to different countries, it's essentially the same thing. You've got your governments, your houses, your flowing water, your markets, and this and that, but there's a different feel between each country, different ways of doing things. And similarly, I think when you start a company, it's like a mini country, if you will. And so if you're getting signals that something is not suiting you, you do have some agency to perhaps address it. And what you mentioned about hiring smarter people, and that could maybe there's could be some other challenges with that, but that would certainly maybe take some of the capacity, or take some of the pressure off of you as the founder.
Yeah. So and speaking of that, my team is all remote, and they've always been remote. They're scattered all around the world, a lot of them in India, but you can't just hire people in India and hope it's going to work out. I've made 15 trips to India between 2010 and the pandemic, a total of 9 months I spent there working and building culture because it's a different world, right? And so people have different things they care about that are important to them. And if you don't have any sense or empathy or understanding of what the differences and importance to them, then how can you expect for them to adopt the culture that you're trying to imbue throughout your company? So, right. And so they know that I understand them because I spent a lot of time there with them, and eating their food and enjoy, and celebrating their holidays and all that. And so you have to be able to understand other people at that level if you're going to try to build any kind of culture that is going to survive beyond, your belief in what the culture should be. Just telling people to behave a certain way or act a certain way doesn't really work. You have to, basically you have to live it. You have to live it and understand, have empathy for who you're dealing with.
Yeah, transactional sort of situations. It's almost like mercenary armies always lose out to true believers. So yeah, it's important to spend that time in person, get to know them. I spoke to a gentleman who started up I was sitting next to him on a plane in Vietnam, and he was celebrating selling his company to Amazon. And he was telling me how he built it. He's from Norway or Estonia. I forget, actually. Apologies. And he said he was looking for kind of products on Amazon that he thought he might be able to improve upon. So it's like reading reviews and stuff. And I think it was this like humidifier fan or mosquito repellent fan or something like that. And he was reading the reviews and kind of discovering pain points that way. And then he had to find the right manufacturer or supplier. And there's loads. And so he actually put in the footwork and met them in person in China and perhaps some other countries, meeting them face to face. And he said that made all the difference, because when things were stressed or when there's certain challenges with the many variables that go into life and business, he was always kind of front of the queue because he developed those relationships and there was that alignment. So it's really vital, I think, to do that and meet the people face to face, spend time with them, as you said.
It's important. It's really important. And the other thing is, like with India, one of my philosophies is when you made a mistake hiring somebody, like, I want them to be really smart and really capable. That doesn't mean they have to be the most skilled yet, because if they're really smart, their skill builds really fast, right? Whereas somebody really skilled that isn't as smart, is going to plateau very quickly. So, right. So as long as they have the minimum level of skill that we need for that job, and they are really smart and they've got enough experience, because that's really important, that they understand what it means to work in a team in a big project. And right, at least a few, we don't hire people that are just out of college ever, or even with 1 or 2 years of college. So they always have to have a decent amount of experience, because it carries across. But when we make a mistake, which that rarely ever happens anymore, but it used to happen, not frequently, but it would happen. And we realize somebody, either they cheated and they are not as smart as they said they came across as, and they cheated on one of our processes, which we're constantly improving those hiring process, right? Then we would fire them right away. We wouldn't try to carry them, because now they've left their other job and now they're a part of our company, because it sends a wrong message to the rest of the team that now it's your job to have to carry this person because we did a lousy job hiring. Right. And it's not helping the person that you hired, because they don't have a future at your company, and they're just going to be kind of hanging out there for a while, bringing the level of quality down until you finally do let them go. So we just basically move them on to the next opportunity quickly. And it took little while for my team to recognize that they'll survive when they fire somebody like that. It's not going to make everybody be afraid of their job, that they think that they're gonna lose their job because now we're firing. They will actually develop respect for it because they'll recognize we're firing somebody on their behalf, right? And once they understood this, they became fiercely protective of the culture, and and they have no trouble anymore. They're almost ruthless about it when somebody's new, until they see that they're really as good as we thought, and then they become part of the family. And there's no way you're going to get rid of them because nobody's going to let them go.
As the host of Scaling Smarter podcast, what's the biggest scaling mistake you've seen, and what approach can a small business owner take to avoid this?
So when scaling, and I keep saying I'm going to look this up. I cannot remember where I heard this, but there's this logarithmic growth truth or formula. So to get your first customer, what you have to do to get the first one is not the same thing you have to do to get the next 10. And once you hit that 10th one, now you want to grow from 10 to 100. What you have to do to grow to 100 is different than what you had to grow from 1 to 10. And it seems to be a law of logs, right? So you get to 100, and now what got you to 100 isn't going to get you to 1,000, right? So it takes a rethinking of your marketing strategy, of your deployment, your support, all, your infrastructure, whatever. Now you're ready to go from 100 to 1,000, and then you hit 1,000, you're going to hit a plateau again, right? And you're just not going to get to 10,000 because you don't have the company from a marketing, sales, whatever the structural things that you're missing, it's not the same. So that's the mistake I think that founders make in terms of scaling. They'll get to a certain point and they plateau, and then they just keep trying the same things to grow, and they're not growing anymore or any faster. And eventually the market starts to shift a little bit. They might be even shrinking a little bit and still trying the same things, or a little bit different, but not stepping back and say, what does it mean to be a 10 times bigger company? What do I have to now do to start to create that reality?
How do you navigate those transitions? Are you just talking with people at different levels so you can kind of understand the roadmap to get from, let's say, 100 customers to 1,000, et cetera?
And that's really different for every industry, right? Because it has a lot to do with, and every product. Some products require a lot of support, like in the software world. Some products require a lot of support, and they require a lot of implementation and onboarding support and things like that. And other products require virtually none. Some products require big scaling architecture. Other products can handle very large number of users with not that much scaling infrastructure in place. Right? Some products get bigger because you're developing really fast features and functionalities, and the way you grow is through leveraging growth through your existing customers. And some products are the opposite. Anyway, so it really depends on the product. You have to picture yourself from my perspective, you have to picture yourself as already having 10 times as many customers. And so if I had 10 times as many customers now, what would I have to do to support them? How did I actually get them, right? Not think in terms of how am I going to grow from where I am today, but how did I grow to get there? And I think that's an easier way. And then of course, look for other companies that you can look at as parallel, how they grew to the next step. Maybe even you look for coaches who have expertise in scaling, because they can help. A lot of times it's system. A lot of times it's just systems. At some point, you have to put playbooks in place, right? So that you can bring new people in without it requiring all your best people to mentor everybody one at a time. So when is that? Which playbooks go in first? These are all the kind of scaling infrastructure things that have to happen at different times.
You've worked in everything from Broadway productions to real estate investing. Is there a secret recipe to spotting profitable market opportunities?
I can't say that I'm the one that spots them. One thing I learned early on is when somebody asked me about their idea, I'm happy to give them my suggestion about it, but I'm not going to tell them if I don't think it's a good idea or not. I'm not going to tell them, because the last time I did that was with that one you were just talking about, the Broadway producer choreographer who created StageRite software. And I told him, I said, look, you want to build this sophisticated iPad app for staging all your Broadway productions, and you want to sell it on the App Store when the iPad was new for $199. $199. And how big is this market? This is not a cheap app to build. Are you going to be able to recoup your investment? Because I always felt like I should be honest. He said, well, look, this is a dream of mine. If you don't want to produce it, then I'll find somebody who will. And I said, no, I'm happy to produce it. I just wanted to be honest with you. Anyway, he was one of my most successful customers. 3 years later, he had 50,000 downloads off the App Store. We were building a multi-user version that was both web and iPad. Every play for the last 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years now, has been produced on Broadway, and most of the country at this point has been produced with StageRite. The Olympic opening games, the Emmys, the Tonys, all been produced. So, and I tried to talk him out of doing the app because I didn't think right. So some things that I recognize now that I didn't recognize then. That's one of those foundational things is, okay, are you solving your own problem, one that you struggle with yourself on a daily or weekly basis? And the reason that's important is if it's yearly, it's difficult to be top of mind and to get people's attention. Even when they have the problem, they won't think about your software because you didn't have a chance to kind of be in front of them often enough when they have the problem. So you have this problem with daily or weekly, at most weekly. And can you easily quantify the value of this problem in terms of cost and how much it personally impacts you like this problem is killing me as well as it has a lot of cost to me? And are you in an industry full of people just like you struggling with the exact same problem you're struggling with? And do you have reach to that community? He had all of those. And if you have that, you're more than halfway there, as long as you don't get too focused and in love with your product instead of focusing on the problems and the customers. But you've already mitigated so much of the risk if you have those things. And I didn't recognize that at the time, that's a key success factor.
You talked about some of the things that AI can do well, perhaps even better in the future, but you don't really see it as being a kind of set and forget type of solution right now. You're still going to need human expertise involved. Will people working in software lose their jobs because of AI automation?
Oh, no question that people will lose jobs, and it will create jobs too. So if we think of the internet and all the automation around the internet, you could have predicted that would have eliminated tons of jobs, right? Where everything was a manual process, or scanners or GPS, but that created new markets, that created all kinds of jobs as a result of those things. The more automation you build, the more you're creating the more you're replacing what people are doing manually. But in the process of doing that, you're increasing our capacity to produce things, which creates more jobs because more products get created out of all this. So the question is, it's always a process of something's expanding while you're eliminating other things. So if you think of it almost like I was saying, you've got this bubble that's going out where you're pushing away, where in the middle of it are all the jobs that are being replaced. And on the outside, you're creating more capacity and more of something else, which is creating new jobs. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't see, I see the internet I see automation replacing a lot of jobs, but in the process, like I said, you are also creating all kinds of opportunities for new jobs, and you're selling stuff faster, which is creating more manufacturing. And it's a constant catch up back and forth between the two, because if the jobs go away, people stop buying stuff, then AI is not going to be very helpful to anybody, right? So, and that's the same thing with automation. I I think we're safe, and we definitely do. Yes, there will be some jobs that are significantly replaced in the short term, just like there always are when there's new shifts in technology. There'll be new opportunities to come up like behind it that people don't recognize now that will be good fits for the same people and somewhat to their skills.
Well, we're both old enough to remember a time when us communicating this way would have been akin to magic.
Oh, no question. This is like not far from, I still look at it and think this is kind of magical, right? Being able to have my best friend is, ChatGPT or whoever, right? That is always there to help me work out anything, because it knows everything and it's empathetic.
Right. Right. It's never groggy in the morning.
It's never groggy in the morning. Exactly. Right. And it was very funny. The other day, my wife asked me for plant food for her hibiscus. I was at Lowe's buying. I like to do woodworking and metalworking. These are hobbies of mine. And we bought these big pieces of agate that are like 50, 60 pounds, gorgeous Brazilian agate from the Tucson gem show about a month ago. And I told my wife, she said, they don't have frames. I said, I'll make the frames. To me, this is like, exciting, fun project for me. She's like rolling her eyes. Great. In a year from now, maybe we'll have frames. Anyway, I'm almost done with the frames. The end of that story. But I was at Lowe's buying parts for that. And she called me and she said, can you pick up some plant food for my hibiscus? I don't know what food I need, but there should be something there. And he'd say, okay, I'll look. So I looked. There's nothing that says for hibiscus. So I asked ChatGPT what I needed, and it told me that there's some good brands, anything that's really loves this acid. And I thought, okay. And then I just went to the newer feature, which is the video feature. And I turned it on. And I said, do you see anything here that would work? And immediately it said, yes. And I'm standing like 30 feet back looking at hundreds of products, just moving it very quickly across it. It's the Mollytone, I think it was the Mollytone. I can't remember what the name of it was. Is perfect for that hibiscus. And I said, which one is that? He said, well, it's in a red and white bag towards the left. And so I walked up to the shelves and I didn't see it. And she said it was second from the top shelf, farther to the left. And so I stood back and I went like that. She said, there it is. And it was like right there. And then and I brought it home. She goes, that's exactly what I need. That, right. Wow. Right. Magic.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's exactly what we want.
It's exactly what we want. Right. My wife went, it can do that? I said, yeah, it's actually even better at it than I realized it is. How quickly it was able to just parse everything in front of it.
And I think it frees us up to continue discovering and exploring as humans. I don't think it's like we're supposed to necessarily compete with AI on the like multiplication table or something like that. Like what it can do better, it will do better, and we're free to kind of be the mortar or some other like entity alongside it.
Right. I mean, I could see a future. I don't know how far out in the future where AI is actually producing products, right, and automating products, and the need making products so much less expensive, while also keeping the world much greener and making it possible for us to not even have to, where we can focus on higher level thing, kind of like a Star Trek-ish kind of future where you don't need money anymore, right? Because of abundance. There's so much abundance that which produces, the economy is a different kind of economy. It doesn't require currency anymore. Now, some futures, I can't predict a lot of things, so that's way out there. Oh, excuse me. I do have a kind of a fun prediction, which I believe is realistic in the next 5 to 7 years, that we won't need parking garages anymore, like multi-level parking garages or big parking lots anymore, except in very few cases. And I believe that because autonomous driving will happen, and will happen in enough brands that there'll be enough competitive pressures with companies that are buying fleets of these things. And there'll be a critical mass where you just having a car will be a luxury, because why would you need your own car when if you live in a city where an autonomous vehicle can be a minute or two away always. And it's safer, and you don't, right? And it's much less expensive than having your own car.
Yeah, incredible. If you could give a single piece of advice to your 20-year-old self, what would it be?
Invest all your money in Microsoft, then invest it in Apple.
So look for those companies today.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely look for things that look promising or that you think might get acquired, and invest in them now, because it's hard to imagine how much things appreciate in 10, 15, 20 years. Even if it goes up and down and seems flat for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years, and all of a sudden it'll just take off. I mean, look at real estate in the last 4 or 5 years. We had our home in Scottsdale that I bought in 1992.
Good timing.
Right. And it stayed relatively flat. It went up some, and then it jumped about 2 or 3x, and then it stayed flat again for 10 years. And when it dropped back down in 2008, and then came back around 2013 or 14, it was at the same level and stayed there until the pandemic, and then went woof, like that again. And then, we just sold it and bought a house in San Diego 2 years ago.
You got good taste. I haven't been to Scottsdale, but I heard good things. And San Diego is one of my favorite U.S. cities.
Best city ever for so many reasons, but the most mild weather in the world. I didn't know of any city. Yeah, that's an actual thing. It's the most mild weather in the world.
What is it, do you think, about Scottsdale that lends itself to successful entrepreneurs? A number of successful entrepreneurs are from there.
Well, there's a big tech startup community in Arizona. There was a big push for it for about 20 years at the government level, and from some big investors there who just grew and grew and grew the whole tech startup community there. So I don't, and plus, it's a new modern city because it's more than doubled in size since I've lived there. So most of the city is new, and it's affluent. So you have the most shopping. It used to be the most shopping per capita of any place in the country. I know it was up until 6 or 7 years ago. I don't know if that's still true or not, because I haven't kept up, but it's just so people move there thinking, and you don't have earthquakes and you don't have any kind of natural disasters other than heat. That's, as far as I'm concerned, as hot as it gets now. That's a natural disaster because you have to live through the summers there, but people love it there. So it draws a lot of affluence and a lot of investment and a lot of the tech community. And so there's lots of startups being formed there. So that would be my belief on why.
What mistakes do young people chasing success in tech make today?
Some of the ones I talked about, I think the biggest one, well, to me, the biggest one is that you need an MVP and a pitch deck and an investor to raise money and be successful. And none of that, to me, that's the biggest mistake, because it gets you off on the wrong foot. And your chances of going out and getting a significant investor with your product are infinitesimal. So the typical VC sees 3,000 pitch decks for every 30 they invest in. And of the 30 they invest in, 70% of those will fail. 20% of those will be profitable, but not the unicorn that they're looking for, and 5 to 10% will be the unicorn. That's out of 3,000, right? So it's tiny percentage. So you have a 1 in 1,000 chance, 1 in 100 chance when you pitch a VC that you can raise money from them, according to the statistics. Then all the work you do to try to raise money, creating the pitch deck, marketing to VCs, going out and pitching, none of that moves your business forward in any measurable way. Unless you get a VC, unless you finally get that investment and that VC is leveraged in your market, none of that will move your business forward. other than just the money itself once you finally get an investment. Whereas if you drive forward on doing sales and marketing, even before you have a product, all of that is growing your business in valuable, tangible ways. In terms of learning your market, learning your customers, starting to generate revenue, building up your beta cache of customers, so that you're focusing on your MVP for product solution fit. Most people focus on building an MVP to prove product market fit. That's the wrong time because you don't know if you're going to be able to sell it until you have an MVP and you've made this huge investment to build it. Product solution fit is now that you know who your customer is and what the value proposition they need solved, is the product delivering that value? And that's product solution fit. And you need paid customers to validate that. You can't get that from free betas.
Well, David, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. You gave us a lot of valuable insights, and look forward to speaking with you again. Is there anywhere that you'd like to point people to follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, and thank you for asking me that. Sure. You can learn about my company at tekyz.com, which is spelled TEKYZ.com, TEKYZ.com. You can email me. The link won't be in the show notes for my email, but I'll give it to you if you made it all the way to the end of the show. It's david@tekyz.com. And I'm easy to find on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, David.